The McDonnel Cemetery by John Quay 84. Martha stood very still, staring out across the valley below her. Her bloated and desiccated corpse couldn't feel the bite of the frost that lay thick on the nearby headstones, nor could she find any joy in the approaching sunrise. Slowly, she began to hobble back towards her mausoleum, skin sloughing off her feet with every step. The locals around Siamese Creek knew about Martha. No one ever went to the McDonnell Cemetery after dark. It was unfortunate that the cemetery sat right on the edge of a national forest. Hikers, backpackers, campers, and hunters went missing from this part of the forest every year. Local officials had even been forced to close the Big Pine camping area due to so many people disappearing from it. The Big Pine camping area sat just 200 yards from the McDonnell Cemetery. Justin, his best friend Daniel, and their girlfriends Laura and Jamie had just finished setting up camp. They were in the Rustic Bend camping area. It was on a ridgetop that overlooked a wide bend in Siamese Creek. From the campground, you could see a large expanse of the valley, and you could just make out the other campground on the next ridgetop over. All of the leaves were turning vibrant shades of yellow, orange, and red in the crisp, cool autumn air. Jamie sat on a log bench, watching a pair of white-tailed deer meandering along the valley floor. Only about 30 feet down the hill, she could see a trio of squirrels chasing and squawking at each other over the rights to a large walnut tree. High above, a red-tailed hawk was gracefully gliding along the air currents. It was all so picturesque and beautiful. Jamie knew she had to get her camera and get some wildlife photos. She went to inform Justin of what she was doing. Justin made her take his hiking pack. It had a knife, a flashlight, a compass, and some snacks in it. Jamie had really wanted him to go along with her, but he was too busy drinking beer by the fire with Daniel. Laura had an upset stomach and was lying down for a while in her and Daniel's tent. So Jamie took off by herself. She started off quickly, making her way down the hill, but she never made it to the valley floor. Justin tilted his can back and finished off the last swig. He crushed the can and threw it off to the side of his tent. "She should have been back by now," he said to no one in particular. Laura had woken up and was now having a hushed, private conversation with Daniel on the other side of the fire. It was now dusk. It would be pitch black outside within half an hour, and Jamie still hadn't returned. Justin was getting worried. He stood up and swayed a bit from the effects of the alcohol. "I'm going to look for her. Are you two coming?" Justin asked Daniel and Laura. Laura quickly responded. "Someone should stay here in case she makes her way back to camp, and maybe we should call the park rangers." Justin shrugged his shoulders and went off to find his flashlight. Martha's empty eye sockets watched the young man with the flashlight making his way across the valley floor. He had fallen into Siamese Creek while attempting to cross it, and he was now soaking wet and moving along much slower than before. Martha's withered lips drew into a smile, and a fetid drool started seeping from the corners of her rotted mouth. Martha started hobbling down the hillside towards the valley floor. Justin shouted "Jamie" for what seemed like the 1,000th time. No response. He was swinging his flashlight back and forth, hoping to spot the colorful jacket that Jamie had been wearing. As he came back around with his flashlight, he noticed a couple deer that were running past him. In fact, they seemed to be fleeing from something, but he didn't really think much about it. "Jamie," he yelled again. He went a few more steps, and then came to the edge of what used to be a small pond. Now it was just mud. He started shining his light about on the other side, when something cold hit him from behind. Justin fell several feet into the mud, his flashlight going with him. He struggled to come back up. The mud was thick and soupy, and it was deep, much deeper than he would have anticipated. As he flailed about for something to grab onto, he felt a cold and impossibly strong hand grab the back of his neck. It forced his head back under the mud. Justin fought with everything he had. He tried to find footing with his feet, but there was nothing but more mud. He reached behind him, trying to break hold of whatever had him. He felt something cold, wet and slimy, and try as he might, he couldn't break its hold. Justin was yanked out of the mud, just to be dunked back under again. He wriggled and twisted violently, fighting with everything he had, but his efforts were wasted. He wasn't going anywhere. Justin's lungs burned. He hadn't taken a breath in over a minute. His scream bubbles slowly made their way up through the thick mud, popping once they reached the surface. His body began to convulse, and then it went very still. Martha let out something like laughter, but her lungs didn't work anymore, so it sounded more like a wheezing growl. She started hobbling back towards her mausoleum with her new prize. Jamie had tripped and fallen while making her way down the hillside. She had hit her head at the base of a tree and had completely blacked out. She woke up in a briar patch. It was dark out. Her head hurt badly, and she had twisted her ankle. She thought she could hear her name being called, and had started to respond when she heard Justin screaming for his life. She tried to stand up, but her ankle wouldn't let her. And then she saw it. A grotesque, dead thing. It was right behind Justin, and it kept shoving his head down into what looked like mud. Jamie wanted to scream. Everything in her wanted to scream, but she couldn't. She was completely paralyzed with fear. As soon as Justin had left camp, Laura had called the park rangers. They had a station nearby, and she had felt like they could probably use the guidance of sober professionals. After she made her report, her and Daniel decided to go out together and help look for Jamie. They each grabbed a flashlight and headed off down the hillside. Unknowingly, they passed within about 50 feet of where Jamie was. They had just made it to the valley floor when they heard Justin scream. Daniel took off running towards the sound, splashing through the cold waters of the Siamese Creek without a second thought. His friend needed him. He was on the way. By the time Daniel made it over to where the screaming had come from, no one was there. But the signs of a struggle were obvious. Mud was splashed all over the grass. It looked like someone had been down in the mud pit and then had been dragged back out. Daniel continued searching the area and came upon one of Justin's shoes. Daniel was starting to feel like maybe he should go back to camp and make a call to the police. But before he could go anywhere, he heard Laura shriek. Daniel looked up and saw Laura, white as a ghost, screaming and pointing behind him. Daniel turned and saw a corpse standing and staring back at him. Martha's molted flesh sagged and hung from her bones. Her clothes were rotted away so that Daniel could see all of her in her distorted and putrid nudity. She had long, wispy hair down to her waist and claw-like fingernails. Her eye sockets were empty, yet still revealed a malicious intelligence. Daniel opened his mouth to scream, but no noise would come out. He turned and started to run, but before he could make it 2 steps, a rancid, decomposed fist exploded from his chest. Jamie clawed and scrambled her way back up the hillside, back into the camp. 2 park rangers were standing there. "Better call an ambulance," one said to the other. They seemed entirely unalarmed about the situation, almost like they'd been through this 100 times before. Jamie just stared at them, sobbing uncontrollably. She couldn't talk. Laura woke up to find her hands and feet bound. Some sort of gag had been placed in her mouth. She was laying on her side on what felt like a stone floor. She couldn't see much, as it was almost pitch black, but she could hear something eating. She could hear its lips smacking noisily and occasionally what sounded like bones being chewed upon. Martha sat in her mausoleum, happily eating. She wouldn't need to eat again for at least the next 2 full moons. 3 if she decided to eat the pretty one. But, she thought to herself, it has been an awfully long time since I've had an apprentice.